All right, so let's talk about promises. Promises come to the rescue to some degree. Not entirely. It's still a little bit, it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good solution. So a promise is something I can hand you that will eventually turn into the thing you want. So a promise has an interesting API. So we can make promises. So we can go const foo, or my promise equals promise dot resolve 1. So if I look at my promise, it's a promise object. You don't really.
You didn't have to say new.
It's just promise.resolve. So if you want to make a resolved promise, so now we have a thing that's a promise, my promise, and it's got a then method to it, and the then you get to use to look at what it resolves to when it eventually resolves. So again, this is kind of like a callback. Value console.log value. Oh, I guess that's the logged output. That was a little weird. It's like this is the return of this thing. Yeah, exactly. So there's a number of ways of constructing a promise. I constructed it in the simplest possible way there, where I said, I did a promise.resolve. So that was like immediately resolve the promise. You can have a promise that's sort of immediately rejected as well. So bad promise equals promise.reject. Bad news. It's cool. So I've got this bad promise. If I try to call .then on it, it won't work because it got rejected. So this is not going to happen.
Could you just put console.log.value?
Yes. Yeah. I was hoping somebody would catch on to that. Yes. There's no reason to use this construct. I could just pass console.log, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it didn't work because it was rejected. So there's another method that you use on a promise when it's rejected. Bad promise.catch. So if it's rejected, you do it this way, console.log. So then we got the bad news out of it.
And if you
Yep.
put a catch at the very end of like a chain of thens, will
Right.
it catch any in that chain?
It sure will. So you can go bad promise .then. So here's what happens in the good case. And let's dress it up a little bit. Value console.log. Okay. Value .catch. Value. Don't really have to put the points around. Console.log. Not okay. Value. Okay, so it goes directly to the catch case. So we can build, we can use this API to make slightly more complicated things. We can go so JS. Okay, let's just do this again without screwing around so much. And we got all this nonsense. Okay. Why do we have? Okay, and then we go maybe promise dot then value okay value dot catch console.log, not okay, value. All right, let's try running that thing. Node test promise. I guess I do need a new here. I can never remember. Why is it mad about reject? Oh, it prefers throw. No. Yeah. You can reject with whatever value you want.
One more, it's pretty simple. So
It's not throw, it's just new error. Yeah. All right, and then here. Okay, good. Not okay, error bad. I don't want to print it.
Okay, cool. So we
Sorry. Yes?
can we just talk about this again?
Yes, let's talk about
Or give it done?
are they?
You can call those whatever you want.
So they're positional then.
They're positional. You can call this yeah and nope.
They're just there and you're giving variables so you can then
Yeah.
go down here and do this.
Standard hates you when you do this. It'll say like, no, they must be called resolve and reject. But that's just a convention. But you don't have to do that. It will still work. Okay, that's where we're going next. We're going to fix this callbacks to turn it into a promise-based API instead of a callback-based API. So, so how would we do this with a promise? We want API call. Let's just talk about how we want API call to work. API call is now going to return a promise. So we're going to go API call, but instead of passing it a function, we're going to go .then and .catch. So now the code that went in here is going to go into the .then instead. So we're going to go response, SPONSE. So far it's not like much better. Like, okay, it's just in a different spot. Right? And then we want another one. Put this up here. So, okay, then we actually want to deal with the error version, so let's do that. So this is error. Just copy this. Okay, so now that's sort of the canonical promise method. And then we want to do it again. So we're going to go API call.
Well, can we just?
Oh man, don't give it away. Yes, we'll get there. There's actually something awesome about promises that you don't know, but we'll get there. All right, so so then we just kind of keep on going. Response to, and here's our callback when things work out okay. And it's going to be, ugh, still kind of sucks. All right, and then we can go console.log rand number 1 plus rand num 2. And then we can go, huh, look how great this is. All right. Okay, and this is error 2. Error 2. Okay, cool. So this is the promisey version. So this is a kind of a promisey callback pyramid of doom. Callback hell. Let's see if it works. So node promises.js. Nope, it doesn't. What did I do wrong? I forgot to actually implement it. Good point. Okay, let's implement it. Yes, so we know we need to return a promise. That's what this has to do with a resolve and a reject. Okay. So how do we make this happen? Shovel all this code in there. Blump.
So we need to like separate the resolve first.
Okay.
So I guess like from set timeout all the way before the catch.
It's kind of here for us anyway already, isn't it? We have callback and we have error. So that just turns into resolve and reject. And we should be doing this properly with a new error. Okay. That's basically it. We just promisified this thing. All right, so there's the promisey version. Let's see if it works. I still screwed it up. Undefined is not a promise. Do I need to say new? I can never remember. Let's see what kind of programmer I am. Oh, that works. Okay, so we logged it twice. Hopefully it's going to break sometimes. Good. Breaks, 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 breaks a lot. And then sometimes it works. Okay, so that's great. I mean, hopefully you're not convinced yet that promises are a good thing. That's actually not that awesome. It's kind of the same deal. So one thing that's kind of cool is that promises can return promises. So rather than a promise just returning you a thing, a promise can return you a promise for a thing, and you can chain them. You can chain them up. So let's see if I can show you how awesome this is. So inside the maybe promise, I could return you another promise. I could return maybe promise. Is this going to work? So that worked. Can return either a no-true promise or a value, and it will always be caught by subsequent thens. So we can do a then value console.log okay value. So most of the time it's not going to work, and then sometimes it will. So we chained those promises, and we can do it over and over and over and over again. And we should make the percentage failure small. Oh, because I did this wrong. Sorry. I want to chain the promises. So I made the percentage that it's going to fail small enough that it got through all those maybe promises and eventually got to this then it did a console log of okay. So we can return a maybe promise, or we can just return, we could also return 22. Sorry, I should do this a little bit differently so it's more obvious. So what will this print? Assuming it doesn't crash with the rejects. Yeah, it'll say okay 22. Because it doesn't care what the result of maybe promise was. It ignored the return, the resolve. So this resolves with good. That's great. It doesn't actually care. It's just going to resolve with 22. So this will replace the value of whatever maybe promise returned. So at any point you can return a promise, or you can return a real thing, or you can take whatever you were given, value, and you can return something based on that. To value to be true. Okay, and there's the value that was returned by maybe promise, and we just threw it in there and changed it around. Too good to be true.
Maybe I missed this, but if you don't return anything in a then statement, can you continue training thens?
Good question. All right, so if you don't return, let's just say
so for instance, like
console.log yo, for example.
For example, amendments, and then you want to like append your own stuff after.
That
was like
that's a weird example.
weird example.
That's okay.
I'm just trying to think of something where like you wouldn't return anything but still want to do stuff.
Well, here's an example.
Okay.
All right, I'm not returning from here anymore. What will this print? It's not going to fail because I didn't raise an exception.
Okay, undefined.
What's that?
Yeah, but that's
Okay,
not.
undefined.
that's
Okay.
never returned.
Every function implicitly returns undefined if you don't say. So that's going to return okay undefined. So value isn't being returned any longer from line 18. So that returns undefined, okay undefined. It still passes through. This is a very common mistake actually. Not to remember to return something. Exactly. If you did value here, then it's a happy story again. Okay, so back to the topic at hand. How can we make this better? The answer is return API call instead of calling it, and then you can .then it here with response to. I mean, it's not great, but it's better. At least it's flat and simple, and you only have one catch. And it's a lot more readable, right? API call, then process it. API call again, process that response. Does this out? Yeah, and sure enough, Linter's like, hey, you didn't use random number up here, and where the heck did random number come from down there? So, can anybody think of a way to fix this? Yeah, we can make it a closure. It was, yeah, maybe there's a more sophisticated way to do it.
Would you not return it though? Like along with API call? Like an array or something or an object?
There is a more sophisticated way to do this, but I'm not sure how you would. So you mean like
Well, since we
random?
only have 2 API calls, if we had like a ton, I would see like that being terrible.
Are you thinking like that?
Yeah.
I don't think you can combine. You either have to return a promise or a primitive.
Oh.
You can't do both. There is a more elegant way to do this, and I'll go ahead and do it in a second. So now we just don't define it there, and this should all work out. And sure enough, maybe eventually it'll work. There it goes. Okay, so hopefully this looks a little bit more streamlined. There's another approach you could do. There's some kind of fun tricks you can do with promises. You can do a promise.all. API call, API call. .then, value 1, value 2. It wants parens. Then you just like, let's do it. Parse data 1. I should call this response 1, I guess. Response 2. Response 1.
Let's see how you would make that, like, get an arbitrary number of numbers, right?
Do that as many times as you want, and then
So you just like make it like what you showed me earlier. What's called the spread. Spread operator, and then just do a for loop through. the
Yep.
number and then-
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that'd be fun to do that with this example. So parse data 1. Why is it mad about this? Oh, I didn't do an open brace. Okay, random number 1. I already have the thing here. Bam, bam. I think there's a little bit more stuff added to them. Let's look at one. Response 1. So it's not really passing our parse. Yeah. So it's got. Oh.
It's got all the responses.
It's got all the responses. Okay.
So you have to do-
All right. So we're just going to go responses. We're just going to go straight to the better solution. Responses. For responses dot let responses dot reduce. Let's not mess around. That's right. All right, give us some of these. That's going to be a response now. It's going to be parse data. bam, and then we're just going to go start at 0. Oh, this is a total. And we're going to go return total plus random number. Const output equals console log output. Console log response. All right, it didn't quite work, did it? See if I can. That's working. Okay.
What was the issue with the spread there?
I had to throw it in a.
Oh, okay.
In the brackets. All right, so that's working 100% of the time. We're feeling pretty smart about it right now. We're going to take out the maybe fail. And then sometimes, well, we have a low percentage. Bump this back up to that. Man. Okay, we just got really unlucky. So that works. Great. Now, the reality of the situation is also that some of these other things often take time. So sometimes these also need to be done, inside a promise. In fact, that's how the API works. The JSON parser takes a little while, and so it doesn't resolve synchronously. So we also have to go, return, if we're going to actually simulate the API properly, resolve reject. Is it new? I can never remember. Is it new? Yeah, it is new. All right, thank you.
It wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird API. All right, and so in this case, we're going to reject, and we're going to resolve. Oops. And then this is an anonymous function. All right, that looks cool. So JSON parser is now asynchronous, and let's actually make it more asynchronous. So we'll go set timeout. Just to prove that it's asynchronous. And we'll give it a quick return. We can't do it this way anymore. So first of all, JSON parser has, okay, I guess it's not that bad. That then. Okay, that's great. But then how do we deal with the fact that we're in the middle of a reduce, right? That sucks. Okay, we can make a map. So this is the problem is this returns promises now. So we can do, let's try this. Promises all. Return promises.all of, and we're going to make a map now. I hope everybody's following me. Response. Yes, response. Return. All right. How do you like that? So now we have a bunch of resolved JSON parsed responses. And then we can .then that stuff. So this is parsed data. Anybody lost? Anybody not lost?
It's gross.
It's gross. Yeah, it's totally gross. And we're gonna. So as bad as callbacks were, this is better. I hope everybody kind of agrees this is better. The next thing is going to be even way better. It's going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe we were screwing with promises or any of that stuff. And that's async and await. But I just kind of wanted to give you a taste of how terrible this could be. So. All right, so we've resolved all the API calls. We have responses. We're now going to go through all the responses and we're going to parse them. So then we have parsed data. Now we want to reduce the parsed data, right? Yeah, parsed data dot reduce, and so parsed data list. I guess this might be a little more straightforward. And so we're gonna parsed data, and now we're going to get the value. We're going to initialize this with 0, and we're going to, this is a total, comma, parse data, and now we're going to return total plus get the value of the thing. And I don't know what the heck this is anymore. So also, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is rather than chaining these thens in a pyramid of doom, I can just return them, and then it flips back to the bottom of the chain, right? So I've returned all the promises. Now I've got a list of I've got a parsed data list. I want to return the reduced thing. So then at the end of this all this business, I should be able to do a .then console log. Does that make sense? Maybe I shouldn't have skipped straight to that. I can go final value console.log final value. So again, I'm using this feature of being able to return either a promise. So this returns a promise. Promise.all returns a promise. JSON parser returns a promise. So JSON parser is returning a promise that feeds up to promise.all. I'm returning the promise of promise.all. So that promise resolves when all of these JSON parser promises also resolve. So that'll take me to the next then. I then now have a bunch of parsed data in the list. I'm then going to return, I'm going to reduce this down by just adding all the values from the parsed data. So we're just going to pull out the server response object data 0 attributes value. I'm going to return that, and now I'm not returning a promise anymore. I'm returning just a number. But that's okay. We can deal with numbers just as well as we deal with promises. So that number gets popped out of this then to the final value. I just log it. And if there's any justice in the world, it doesn't look okay. I'm mapping. In fact, I think I just wanted to do this on one line so it's a little clearer. Promise.all. Okay, that looks cleaner. Holy smokes. Before it was just like, call the thing, deal with the output, and then go to the next step. But now, anytime something becomes asynchronous and we have promises involved, I mean, what was a pretty simple, straightforward set of code here has now become really overwrought and nasty. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to write asynchronous code in a similar way to synchronous code? If we could just like put in some magic sauce that says, you know, when something takes a while, just go do it and come back to me with the results when it's done. And there is such a thing. It's called async and await. Just because async and await have solved a lot of these problems doesn't mean you don't have to know this. Underneath, async and await still deal with promises. So you still have to know the promises API. Callbacks are still used everywhere. As you can see, I'm still using callbacks. So callbacks are still something you have to learn. Async and await will make your life easier so that you're never going to have to write code like this again, hopefully. So async and await is going to clean all this up. But still, at the very top of this chain, we're still going to have promises. So it's important to know promises. There's also a really good article out there called There is a Problem with Promises. We have a problem with promises. And I want you all to read this for home. Because I want you all to I want to make sure that you all understand the difference between these 4 promise statements. These all do something different. And until you understand what's different between these 4 statements, you don't understand promises.